Paul Fennewald, thanks a lot for joining us and talking with us about the horrible events that happened recently at Sandy Hook in Connecticut. In light of the murders that occurred there in Connecticut, Paul, what should school districts be doing right now? Should they be reviewing their safety plans in your view?
Brent, I think that's absolutely right. They need to step back for a second and do that due diligence and looking at what they have in place. Are their procedures and their policies and their physical security appropriate in light of the full spectrum of risks that a school faces? Everything from not only the active shooter coming in, but things like severe weather and how they shelter their children. And again, taking a holistic view of school safety and security for our children.
And what resources does the Center for Education Safety have in this area? Can you assist schools in doing a review like this?
Yes, we certainly can. We have everything from, we do training in various areas, including training on how do you build a solid emergency plan. We have, through the state, ERIP, Emergency Resource Information Plan, has a template for best practices. We have, MSBA has developed a school safety assessment program where we can go in and work with the school doing a safety assessment and looking at what their practices are and the physical security that they have, and making some possible observations or simple suggestions about how they would do simple changes to maybe make the school a little bit more secure. There's a CES resource toolkit that we have at our website that has a variety of resources for everybody from parents to educators to the school public safety community, mental health community, public health community, things like that. So there's a variety of resources and things that we can assist schools with, school districts with, and even the individual families with, if they want to look at school safety and security.
What about the issue, Paul, of public access to school buildings? School buildings tend to be open to the public, and yet there's a need for security. Do school districts need to take a look at that issue and how open they are to allowing the public to come in and out?
I think that's absolutely right, but again, it needs to be a local decision and looking at what's appropriate for their community. Do they want to have people pass through magnetometers and security at that level, or is it adequate to just whenever they come into the school building requiring the visitors to check in with an office, maybe having to be buzzed in, things like that? But again, those decisions are best left at the local level. We, again, at the Center for Education Safety can assist them in looking at what the full scope of solutions are out there, what's possible. But again, it's best at that local level to work with their local public safety community and within the school district, the school system, to figure out what's appropriate for them.
Mm-hmm. And there's a balance, isn't there, Paul? But I mean, we can't make our schools into prisons, but so there's a certain amount of openness, and yet you have to have security at the same time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a real fine line there. And again, I think at the local level, the school boards working with their community, not only the school educators, engaging and involving even the teachers, the custodial staff, things like that in that program, but then also the broader community, that they get buy-in. Because as you know, with any practice, if you're going to make any kind of changes where you're more restricting people's access into something like a school, there's going to be some community shove back possibly if they aren't educated as to the necessity for that and actually buy into being a part of that.
Some folks, Paul, in light of the events in Connecticut, are suggesting that school personnel, teachers or other school personnel might even be armed in order to protect themselves in a situation like this. Tell us about that issue. Are there pros and cons to that?
You're absolutely right, Brett. There are pros and cons to that. And again, you need to look at that holistic issue. Some school districts, it may be appropriate there's already possibly a school resource officer in the school. In some small school districts, there may be no one there that has access to a weapon, but to want to engage your staff to actually carry weapons, for instance, that's a really tough decision that you really need to think through all the repercussions and consequences of doing that. I know my own wife was an educator, and she was lamenting to me that, hey, we didn't get into teaching to be law enforcement officers, and the amount of training, not only the qualification with a weapon so you'll be able to hit what you're shooting at, but then even the decision-making process to know when you should use deadly force or shouldn't use deadly force. And the training requirements, the basic requirements that law enforcement have to go through through to meet that requirement, that's probably at a minimum threshold for schools that would want to meet the same threshold as a law enforcement. I think there's other solutions there. I've talked to a number of people about the fact that we have a lot of law enforcement officers in our communities that are retired, but yet under federal regulations and rules, they're allowed to still carry a concealed weapon. Maybe a school could look at some type of a volunteer program with law enforcement, because again, they're required to take training every year if they're going to continue to be certified to carry a concealed weapon. Maybe they can involve them in the program. Or maybe again, look, just even partnering with your local law enforcement agencies where you haven't had a school resource officer in the school. Maybe there's things we can do in the community to help support that, find the funding for that. So that's a possibility. So there's a lot of solutions available there.
Budget is always an issue, isn't it, Paul? And we've seen some districts have to actually cut back, say on school resource officers and things like that. And those are tough decisions to have to make locally.
Well, they are tough decisions, Brett. I always tell people school safety and security doesn't always have to be just about the money. There's so many things that we can do that cost almost nothing to implement. As an example, at our Center for Education Safety website, there's a CES resource toolkit. And right on the front page of that, there's hyperlinks to 12 things it says that people can do to promote school safety. And there's 12 things for students, 12 things for parents. And just simple things like, parents, if you're going to have weapons in your home, make for sure that they're locked up and secure, and that you store them away from the guns and things like that. And so just basic things. As we pointed out and discussed before, even things like other things that promote safety and security of our children. If you look at the whole scope of where our children are getting harmed, where they die at, it's not in the schools, Brett. As you know, schools are the safest places our children can be. It's like traveling on the roadways with their parents in the vehicles. How many children in our nation, how many of our children are in our state are killed each year because they don't have the proper restraint within vehicles? It's astronomical, the numbers, if people start doing the research. Bullying, another thing. Do you have a nurturing, caring community approach to bullying in our schools? If you look at the number of suicides in our schools, and it's something we don't like to talk about. You don't read about it in the paper, and schools don't like to discuss this, but we're having far too many students feel like that nobody cares about them, and there is the perception that they're bullied and then go on to do terrible things like harming themselves and killing themselves. So there's all kinds of things that we can do that don't cost a lot of money.
And it's still true, isn't it, Paul, that schools are among the safest places that kids can be?
That's absolutely right. Schools are the safest places that our children can be. And again, this tragedy that we saw in Connecticut, that is an anomaly. That's the exception, not the rule for school safety and security.
All right. Paul Fennewald, thanks for talking with us.
Thank you.